Well, I appreciate you joining me today. Let's start with October 7th. We obviously are here at the 1 year anniversary of that horrific event. What is going through your heart and your mind as you reflect on this past year and the fact that it's been 12 months? I mean, it's almost unbelievable.
Actually, yeah, that's unbelievable to think that we are a year from that horrific Saturday, October 7. It's been I don't know if crazy year is the right term. It's unbelievable year. I never even imagined that we will have such a year. The people who lives in Israel, it's quite, I would say, normal to have crazy or intense life, but I have never imagined it will be a year of a war, and unfortunately, we can't see the end. Of course, we are more optimistic these days from the day on October 7, but we still cannot see the end. But we are optimistic.
Well, and being optimistic in light of all that's going on, obviously, as we're talking, there was just an attack by Iran, and there's a lot that's still, undecided on where that will go next and how Israel will fully respond to that. But we're not really here to talk about that as much as we are, and we can touch on that if you like. I really want to go back to October 7th because your experience, doing the job that you do, saving, helping, rescuing others. Take us through your morning that day. How did it start and what unfolded?
Well, it was my Saturday off. I was at home. And like the rest of the people in Israel, I woke up from the sirens that were being all over. I know it sounds strange, but from time to time, that's what's happening in Israel. The sirens with no any pre-notification. But on that morning, it felt different because the sirens were all over. Dozens of sirens in less than a minute, and to be honest, the first few moments I thought it was false alarm. From time to time, I thought maybe it's a technical problem with the system and false alarms. But on my mother app, my Magen Adom organization, the national organization in Israel, we have an app, and I saw notification that injuries around Israel, about injuries. So I realized it's not a false alarm, and I realized that something big and different, unusual is happening. So I did what I used to do, every time it's happening. I put on my uniforms, went on my car towards the place they need me. I live in the south of Israel, so the natural place for me to go were in Beersheba, the big city, the capital city of the south of Israel. So I went over there, but in a very short time, I got a call that I'm needed at our helipad, the place that our helicopter is located. We have one helipad on the north of the country and one on the south. I'm One part of my job in Magen David Adom is a medivac paramedic, and I'm once a week I'm doing 24-hour shift. On a daily basis, I'm the manager of the paramedic school in Magen David Adom. So I went to the helipad and we started operated another helicopter since even before noon. That was the first time I went on the helicopter on October 7th. Even, by the way, without knowing the real size of the event. We didn't realize what is happening around us. We know there are sirens, missiles, and that's the only knowledge I knew on the moment I went on the helicopter. I know there are many injuries, but I had no clue about what's happening in the kibbutzim and the small suburbs next to the Gaza Strip.
How much fear did you have in those moments? Because as a paramedic doing the work that you do, you've seen a lot of things over the years. I'm certain of that. But going into this without the full knowledge of the fact that this is a massive coordinated attack, a terror attack on Israel, but there are people, as you said, who are injured. How much fear, how much consternation did you have in those moments?
Maybe paradoxically, that was an advantage, not knowing the whole reality picture. I mean, if I'm sure that if we would know the amount of terrorists invading to Israel and how much far did they reach inside the territory of Israel, crossing the border, I'm sure that in some of the places that we landed with the helicopter, the pilot would say, we cannot land over there because someone might hit us. Might someone, hit us while we are trying to land or flying above? So not knowing the situation might be an advantage at those moments, but basically, I mean, I'm used to be, as you mentioned, to be a paramedic, going to the dangerous zone, but that was never a war zone. I mean,
Yeah, this was different. I mean, this is
that
unimaginable. Once you got in the helicopter, what happened from there, and what did you start to see?
the first evacuation was from the helipad. I mean, we got a phone call, and the dispatch center told us in less than 5 minutes you will get 3 severely injured soldiers. So the first departure was from there. We got a soldiers, and it was actually less than 5 minutes, as the dispatch center said, and we took them to the center of Israel. So on the way to the center, while we were flying above the south of Israel, we saw a picture that it was like taken out of a war movie. I saw a smoke everywhere, and I could even felt and smell the smell from the ground. From time to time, if you are flying above a fire on the ground, you can smell it, but it was all over, and we saw like a black screen and fire all over the south of Israel. That was unbelievable. I have a short video, and while I'm looking it over and over again, I think like I'm looking on a Hollywood movie. And we realized, although still not knowing how severe it is and how bad it is, we realized that something is happening because we flew above Israel cities and we saw a black smoke going up to the sky, and that was
Wow.
unbelievable.
Wow.
So
I mean, so you're seeing these images, you're realizing something's going on. What were the sorts of injuries that you started to see as you were doing evacuations and rescuing people?
yeah, so from a paramedic point of view, that was not something that I'm not used to see. I mean, from time to time, you can see people that got shot, got burned, or even severely injured. But the intense and the amount of the people that I saw on that day and the day after and the 3 days after was unbelievable. And while treating one person to get more and more calls and people asking our help, the intense of that, the amount was nothing that I could even imagine that in one day I would many people calling and needing my help. That was unbelievable. But I saw people that were shot, people that were crushed. While I treated one young lady from the Nova Party, and we took her out of there about 6 or 7 hours later, and she was shot on her back. But on the way to the hospital, she told me that she can't move her legs, and she think that's because she was hiding under a bunch of corpse. I know it sounds bad, but and she saw that perhaps she couldn't move her legs because of that. That's something I never thought I was even heard from an injured person. I saw people mentally unstable because the thing that they saw, and they were just asking help. Someone, one of the policemen that I was treating, He was also, by the way, was injured in the Nova Party. He got shot from a kalach. It's like a rifle gun in his stomach, and he was lying there for hours. He lost a huge amount of blood, and he was in between conscience. And when we took him to the helicopter, he opened his eye and he asked me if he is alive or dead. He couldn't even know if he's still alive.
Wow.
That's I never heard something like that from a person who needs my help. And
You know,
when I
that
was
officer, that officer, you had a pretty amazing story as well with that officer, right? Because later on you weren't sure what had happened to him. I mean, in the chaos of this, I imagine you deliver him, he gets the help he needs. What then happened after with him? Because I think it's a really cool story to kind of give people a little bit of hope in the midst of this conversation.
yeah. So as I said, he himself didn't know if he's alive. When I told him he's alive, he I hate to say that, but he begged me, leave me here. I had me to live. I want to stay alive because I have a new baby, just 2 months old. And
Wow.
we took him to Jerusalem, to the hospital in Jerusalem. And as you said, I didn't know if he survived. Few weeks later, my brother-in-law is calling me, and he's also a policeman, and he's asking me if perhaps I can remember if I treated his friend. He told me that he just visited his friend, and all his friend is remember is that he was evacuated by an helicopter, and that's it. And I said, of course, I can't remember. I treated dozens of people those days. Even if you will tell me his name, I can't tell. I actually can't tell. So he sent me a picture of him, and you know what? I recognized him immediately. He was a big guy with a beard, someone that you cannot miss. I recognized it immediately, and he told me that he survived. I was so happy for his family, for his daughter, and
Amazing.
you know, yeah. And a few weeks later, after that call, we met again at the helipad, at the helicopter, and I was so, heartwarming. It was so emotional. It moved me to see him, especially for his daughter. She's still a baby,
And
but
especially
I
after
have,
everything you'd gone through. I mean, everything you've
yeah,
all gone through to have those moments in the midst of so much hatred and murder and chaos, to have that happen. I would imagine there are probably rare bright spots in the midst of all of this, to have that be one of them. I have to ask you, as you're doing the, especially on October 7th, as you're doing these rescues, how dangerous was this for you? I mean, you're going up, you're going down, there's chaos going on, there's terrorists. What were some of the dangers you faced in the midst of that?
uh, I think the word faced is correct because while doing that, we didn't thought about that, and we did many rounds of evacuation from the war zone. Now I can call it a war zone to the far hospitals. One time they asked us, the dispatch center asked time to take three severely injured soldiers from a small hospital in a city called Ashkelon, the biggest city that is the biggest city closest to Gaza. And we were landing over there in the hospital, taking those three policemen into the hospital, into the helicopter, sorry, closing the doors. The pilots turn on the engines, and just second before departure, suddenly we heard a huge explosion. I thought we got hit by a missile. And in no time, the helicopter starts spinning and shaking on the helipad, just jumping few feet above the ground. And, while we're speaking, I'm describing it longer than perhaps that was in reality. But it felt like being in a washing machine. We knew, me and my partner, I was already buckled with the seat belts, and my partners had no chance to do it before. And I saw him just from one seat of the helicopter smashing on the wall just in front of us, and we thought that this is the end for us. Eventually, happened, what happened is that we had an intercept just above us, on the sky, just above it, and one big metal piece from the rockets, one of the shrapnels just fell on the rotor, broke one of the blades, and the helicopter just fell apart. He literally fell apart. He was total loss afterwards, and that's lucky that we're still alive. And that was the moment. That was almost 72 hours since Shabbat that we were doing rounds and rounds of taking injuries, in casualties, and that was the moment I literally felt the danger of what we're doing, and and I also realized that I left my family back home behind me. Usually, I'm doing this job many years. When someone needs me, I'm just leaving my house without even thinking about what I'm leaving behind me because I know they're safe. And that was the first time I realized that behind me, I live in my family without knowing if they're safe or not. I realized that they were closing the doors, the windows, sitting inside the shelter in the house without knowing what's happening with me. They were connected to the social medias. You know, young people living in the social media those days. And while I was shouting in the radio that we got hit, I had a chance. I don't know how I managed to do that, but I was when we were shaking inside the helicopter. I was shouting to the radio that we got hit. My logic said that we will need an ambulance to treat us in moments. So I asked ambulance, and someone heard that radio and wrote on social media that Magen Adom helicopter got hit in Ashkelon. My daughter, she is also a volunteer in Magen Adom, our ambulance services. She saw that on the social media, and she knew that I'm on the helicopter, and she started calling me again and again. Eventually, I answered the phone just to say that I'm okay, and then I realized what I'm leaving behind. For the first time after 20 something years of doing that job, I realized that when I'm going, my family stays on my back, and sometimes they need me as well. We
Yeah.
left home.
Yeah. I mean, wow. As you're describing this, I'm just thinking about, these things that you take for granted every single day when you're in the midst of your safety being threatened, right? You're now it's not just that you're there helping other people. You are doing that, but you also are in danger. That puts everything in a totally different perspective for you.
Totally different perspective. That evening I came back home for the first time from Shabbat. Of course, it was a very emotional moment. But afterwards, I have 4 kids. My little daughter, she wants to go to bed like every other normal evening. And she's 10 years old, she's asking me if I can come with her to a room to make sure that no one is under the bed planning to kidnap her in the middle of the night. That was shocking for me. I mean, a war is something for me that I learned at school. It's a term that you learn while you are a student at school. I never realized that will literally enter into my house. And I also know that the war is something that's happening on the border of your country. I never imagined it will be inside my country. We lost every sense of self secure that we have.
Yeah, for your child to say that
Yeah,
as a parent had to have been
that
so
broke.
painful. And one of the questions I had for you, obviously, is, how has Israel changed? And you've always dealt with security issues in Israel, but not like this. And so I don't know if you want to expand on that more, but I think the security aspect, the fact that your small child is saying, Daddy, I'm afraid that somebody is going to come and take me, that's heartbreaking.
That's heartbreaking. That actually, that's I can tell from all the thing that I went through on those days, I think that that specific sentence traumatized me. After everything I saw, this is the thing that touched me in the bottom of my heart and traumatized me. It took me a long time to, I don't know if I can call it rehabilitation, but that that was the hardest thing for me. That broke my heart. I realized that we have gone through a huge event that's going to change our life forever. But
What do you
Israel has,
say right now? There's so much debate and argument around the world about Israel, right? And about how Israel should be responding. And even since day one of this on October 7th, that has persisted. That is not a new issue for Israel. I think oftentimes Israel is held to unrealistic standards that no other country is held to. You know, if these things happen to America or anyone else, there would be no question that the response would be swift and harsh, and there'd be no questions asked about how that response went. I think Israel is held to a different standard sometimes. That's my view on it. What do you make of the way in which the world is responding to this? What is your message to people who maybe don't understand why Israel is fighting so hard at this juncture?
first of all, I was sure that on the very short period after it's all started, we will have a global support or almost totally global support. But we also, everybody here in Israel knew that this is going to be very fast, will change from support to people who are asking questions and then even blaming and all, and even, you know what, that was not a surprise for me that to see the anti-Semitic wave around the globe. We knew it's going to come. And on different situation, the situation before that, I thought personally that we need to take into account what other countries thinking about Israel and to probably behave uh, politically correct. I wouldn't call it politically correct, but together with how our greatest friend, the United States, thinks. But as for now, I don't know any other countries that will stand getting a message, going to the shelter, and in 10 minutes, 200 ballistic missiles will come and hit all your country from all inch of it, and you will not have any secure place to be in. I don't know any other countries that will suffer that and will not fight regardless what other country is thinking about that, even if it will hurt your economy or your foreign relationship or whatever. It's a matter of surviving for us. That's how I see it right now. If we will not
I mean,
do
even
it,
the
no
fact that
one
you have
else.
shelters, I have to interrupt you to say, even the fact that you have shelters the way that you do in your homes, it's such a foreign concept to Americans. When Americans hear that, they're like, what do you mean there are shelters there? That's not something that we live with. That's not something that most countries are living with. And yet you guys are, and you have well before October 7th. And I think the fact that those shelters exist should be a sign to people for them to understand that you are and you have been in a fight for your survival, and that fight is now really ramped up since October 7th. Would that be an accurate assessment?
Exactly. I don't know any other country in the world that you have a personal shelter inside your house. I mean,
Yeah.
just the thinking of you can't build a new house without having a shelter in it is insane fact by itself. And the fact that on the third world or even any other country in the world, the fact that every kid knows that he need to be in less than 10 minute maximum time in 10-minute distance from a shelter is insane. Which kid around the globe lives like that? I mean, when you live like that, even especially as a parent, you don't want your kids to live like that. You want your kids to go and play, driving the bicycles, going to play with friends in the garden, or going to the shopping mall, and you don't have to be worried. I'm not asking them, my kids, how they go and if they're driving the bus or one of the parents is taking them. I'm making sure that they will be in a less than 10-minute shelter away, and that's insane. So that's brought us to situation, or to think that uh, we I can't say that we don't care what other countries uh, thinking, but that's less important right now. The most important thing is for us is to make sure that we can have normal life after this horrific situation will end, and that's what we want. I mean, we're fighting
And
against terror, guerrilla organization, not against the Iranian people or the Lebanese people. We're fighting against guerrilla or terror groups.
well, and I think that's the part that people often miss. Before we go, if you had a critic in front of you, somebody who, and I think you just said it really nicely there, but I want to give you another chance. If you had somebody in front of you who you could say, hey, I want to help you understand this, a critic who doesn't believe that Israel should be behaving in the way that they are, that Israel shouldn't be responding, what would you say to those people to help them understand?
Well, I think people will understand the best when the situation reach personally to them. Many people think about Israel as a small country. Perhaps it's important to them, perhaps not. A small country somewhere in the Middle East. Many of them, the most popular saying to say for those who critic is from the river to the sea. And many people don't even know which river and which sea they are talking about. And what I can say to them, Israel is just on the front line in a bigger game, which are, the players in that game is the United States, China, Iran, and Russia. We are just a tiny piece that right now in the front line in a much bigger game, and you might be next. The people in Europe, the people in the United States, regardless if they like or dislike Israel, if you will not stand next to us right now, you will be next. Look what's happening in Europe. The governments in Europe, the anti-Semitic waves in Europe, the growing of the radical Islamic groups in Europe, and even in the States. Look at the universities. Look what's happening now. You are going to be next. That's what you need to realize. You don't have to like us. You don't have to be a fan of Jewish or Israeli people. If you will not open your eyes and see the radical groups growing, you will be next. That's what I have to say to other
Well,
people. You don't have to like me.
well,
Look on
and
yourself.
that is a powerful message. And I would also remind people in America, especially, that 9/11 was not all that long ago. It's very easy to forget. We have very
To
short
forget.
memories. We forget. And look, for Christians in particular, especially Christians around the world understand this issue, obviously, and support Israel, particularly in America, because, we understand what is happening in other countries, right? What is happening to Christians in other countries, the persecution that exists, and what we're seeing happen with Israel, the entire push to obliterate an entire country, an entire nation of people based on hatred and radical ideology. That is something that, as you are saying, it has affected America and continues to. It has also affected Europe, really the West, and also Christians and Jews being targeted by this. So, you're absolutely right. People need to wake up and understand that. And I appreciate you taking the time today, being very generous with your time, taking us through your story, truly.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. I think that's important that will people hear our story. I'm taking it from the beginning to the end, taking our story as an example of what might happen, God forbidden, if no one will take a step forward and just stay back and say that's Israel problem. I don't mind. But unfortunately, people not just don't mind, they're taking one step forward on the wrong direction and think about it as the Jewish people are the problem. But thank you for letting me bring in this message forward and on to other people. And I know it's perhaps not connected to my last sentence, but every time people ask me, I must mention my colleagues that were murdered, kidnapped,
Please.
On that horrific attack on October 7th, and since then, many of our colleagues, paramedics and medics, were targeted on that day and were killed while trying to help other people. Some of them were murdered inside ambulances with the gloves on their hand. So I must mention
Wow.
that. And the world, even a war, have some basic rules, and you don't hit medical crews. And at this time, they were targeted first, and in order that they won't be able to save lives. So thank you for letting me giving that
Unbelievable.
message, and saying that I'm proud to do what I do, especially in my organization, Magen Adom, which is, by the way, I also have to say thank you very much for the people in America helping us to supporting our organization, helping us to found this organization, because I know it sounds perhaps strange to hear, but our organization, being part of the Red Cross movement, must be unpolitical and not funded by the government. So we are funded by donations and support, and many of our big support is coming from generosity of people from the state and all over. So I have to say thank you. And if you want to reach us and to support our Saving Life organization, you can go to Saving. I would look on the website savinglifeinisrael.org, and you can support us, and we will much appreciate that. And thank you for everything the people in the state is doing for us.
Well, thank you. I so appreciate your time today. God bless you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.